My name's Brian Barritt. I'm from Facebook, a group in Facebook that a lot of you might not even know exists. So people know Facebook for kind of the family of apps that help connect people. So there's Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Oculus with augmented reality and virtual reality. Our group at Facebook is called Facebook Connectivity, and it's actually a group that's at the core of what Facebook does, because Facebook's all about connecting people. And the group at Facebook Connectivity specializes in connecting people. Connecting people is not only important for the world, it's also good for economies and good for Facebook's business too. But it might surprise you to know that 3.8 billion people on this planet still lack internet access. 3.8 billion out of roughly 7 billion of us. So 57% of us on the planet are connected to the internet. And this problem isn't something that's going to be solved very easily. Yes, terrestrial cell towers continue to get built out. Connectivity is projected to increase, at least from a 4G connectivity standpoint, from 43% of connections to 59% of connections by 2025. But that build out is too slow. And there's no one-size-fits-all solution. I meet people that say, isn't this going to be solved? All these LEO constellations are coming online. SpaceX Starlink's coming out next week. Doesn't that solve it? Or isn't fiber going to keep getting built out and more cell towers, and that's going to solve global connectivity? It won't. And here's why. I love this graph. I think data can be really beautiful sometimes, like visual display of information can be really beautiful. And I think this display of information is like the best way to understand why the global landscape of connectivity is so challenging. Just to orient you on what you see here, this is a graph of population density on Earth. And at the bottom, you can see population density on its 5 orders of magnitude in the number of people per square kilometer. So populations on Earth are very clumpy. There's places on Earth that you can only find like 2 people per square kilometer, like Saskatchewan. You go to downtown Manila, you can find 100,000 people per square kilometer. It's incredibly dense there. So you get like these 5 orders of magnitude of population density. And then you also have a tremendous amount of wealth disparity. So this is annual income in 4 scales. That highest scale, the blue, that's $12,000 a year annual income. Like that's the rich quartile at $12,000 per year, okay? So to show you the problem and the way to think about connectivity, I have my handy wireless transmitter here. So this, for our purposes, is going to be like a cell tower or a satellite, right? It radiates electromagnetic energy on the EM spectrum. Okay? And if you imagine it levitating over the surface of the Earth at some altitude, if my altitude's very low, I cover a very small area. But there's a lot of energy dispersed over that small area, right? If I raise the altitude of my transmitter from a cell tower height to the height of a high altitude platform to low Earth orbit to mid-Earth orbit, or here's geostationary orbit, right? Geostationary satellite can cover about 1/3 of the planet with one satellite. The same amount of energy is covering a larger area. So the amount of available data rate, the bits per second that are available per person, is very low per square kilometer, right? So really what we're doing when we're changing the altitude from a cell tower to low Earth orbit to mid-Earth orbit to geostationary orbit is, yeah, we're trading coverage, but there's less internet to go around per square kilometer. And there's ways you can try to improve it, like we can make it like a multi-sector spot beam satellite, right? Add mass on orbit. And we do a little better, right? But there's no one-size-fits-all solution. You can't just put up 3 satellites, say that you have the world covered with connectivity. If that was the case, connectivity would have been solved a long time ago, because there's been geostationary internet coverage covering the whole planet for a long time. So there's no one-size-fits-all solution. So the problem's not just one of population density either. So like we can have an all-of-the-above approach. We can build out cell towers. We can have high-altitude platform. We can have low Earth orbit satellites, mid-Earth orbit satellites, geostationary satellites, and still not solve our problem. Cost is a huge factor. We have to bring down cost dramatically of global connectivity. The cost factor is a very important one to me. Part of what I've done in my career and prior to Facebook, I was working on connectivity challenges at Google, has been traveling the world looking at these connectivity problems and being in the most rural areas of say, South America and Peru, and even areas in developed world here in the US. I grew up in Appalachian, rural Ohio, and there's some very, very poor areas of the United States between rural Ohio and West Virginia in the area where I'm from. And I think that like connectivity can do a lot, not just to help people find their next job or connect to family members, but it also brings people together and breaks down barriers. There's a great video that I was going to show a small clip from, called Beneath the Ink. And if anyone's got wants to check this thing out, it's a short, it's on Vimeo. It won a bunch of film festivals and awards. But Beneath the Ink was filmed in my hometown. And what Beneath the Ink is about people in this rural, poor Appalachian town, a lot of whom were raised to hate people based on the color of the skin or the way they look. And about how, as they grew older, and they learned more about the world around them, and they met other people who had more diverse backgrounds, a lot of them changed their world outlook in dramatic ways. And some of them had tattoos that they came to very much regret. And so, yeah, this video is about a guy who, in my hometown, whose tattoo parlor, he does free cover-ups for people's who have hateful tattoos, who have changed their lives. It's really, really amazing. But bringing that kind of affordable internet access to people is something that's very important to me because of the transformation I've seen in communities from where I'm from and the importance of bringing people together. So beyond just connecting people and changing their outlook and the way they think, thank you, the internet's become a crucial tool for improving livelihoods in many other ways. So when you bring internet access to someone who hasn't had it before, 77% of people learn a new job-related skill. 74% of people discover new job opportunities. We heard all the time from people in rural areas of Latin America and Africa about just their ability to know what commodity prices are right now for bringing food to market. When to plant crops is such a huge factor in their lives. And 60% of the people use an internet connection to pursue an education when they didn't have one before. So how do we help this? How do we enable an all-of-the-above approach to connectivity while also dramatically reducing the cost of connectivity in areas? So that's what we spend all of our time focusing on in Facebook connectivity. And we're pursuing it in a few different ways because you need an all-of-the-above approach. So one approach that we've done is we're building open source software to make it possible for anyone to build their own cellular network and their own Wi-Fi networks and actually monetize them. So this is pretty powerful. It used to be that if you wanted to put up your own cellular network, you're going to spend $1 or $2 million to one of a few companies that make the back end and brain to run the cellular network. We developed a program called Magma. It's totally open source. You can download it. You can run it on a $200 box and build your own cellular network. There's even a blockchain-based network called Helium that's popping up everywhere with 5G bubbles, where people at their own houses can use their residential internet connections to make a 5G hotspot to share with their neighbors and mine a crypto token for providing connectivity to their neighborhood. Yeah, and this shows the installation of Magma, and I think this is in one of the rural neighborhoods of Peru, where Magma is being installed right at these cell sites that are completely free, completely open source to connect these communities. There's other projects that we pursue at Facebook Connectivity, though, that are more directly related to space and reducing the cost of satellite internet access. So if you decide, hey, I'm in a rural community, there's no fiber anywhere, I can't have a cell tower in my region of the world because there's nothing to connect the cell tower to for backhaul, and you want to go get an internet connection, I just screenshotted this. This isn't a knock on Chimeta. All these things are expensive. If you just go and do a search on a satellite terminal right now, if you have a fixed, stamped aluminum dish for a geostationary satellite, you're looking at $250, $300 or more. If you're looking for one that supports low Earth orbit satellite constellations, these things are very expensive. And one of the things you'll note they do, if you look at the bottom, is they actually roll in their they subsidize the cost of this expensive piece of equipment into the monthly data rates, 5 gig, 10 gig, 20 gig, and they roll it into the cost. So this stuff is very expensive. Remember that prior graph. The rich quartile of the country is $12,000 a year. So how do we dramatically reduce the cost of these? Why are these so expensive? Well, mostly physics, right? There's a lot of amplifiers in there and fancy electronic beam forming that probably makes up 60% of the costs. Scale is going to be one big factor. If you produce these things at big enough scale, you can bring the costs down a lot. Why can't we make them at more scale? Well, one reason is interoperability. Most of satellite internet today uses a standard based on digital video broadcasting from back when geostationary satellites were just used for one-way video broadcast. And there's still really, DVB kind of lacks true interoperability. If you're building your own satellite constellation for communications, you can't use the DVB hub that you buy from one vendor with a baseband processor that's not made to work for it. It's not like Wi-Fi, where there's plugfests that ensure interoperability across all the different vendors and flavors of the standard. And they really were designed assuming the satellites were fixed in the sky and were geostationary. When you start to add non-geostationary satellites, and you have mobility, like commercial airliners that want connectivity in maritime, a lot of the people building these mega constellations right now are doing custom extensions, proprietary hacks to this protocol to make it all work, which is just further fragmenting this ecosystem. So lower equipment volumes lead to higher prices. So what are we doing about this at Facebook Connectivity? So this week, we're announcing a major new initiative through a neutral foundation that Facebook supports. It's got dozens and dozens of companies participating, called the Telecom Infra Project. And what we're doing is we're using the latest release of 5G that's coming out in the middle of next year. Everybody hears about 5G. Most people don't realize there's releases of 5G that come out every year. Every year there's new versions of 5G. So 5G release 17 adds something really cool. It adds support for something called non-terrestrial networking, native in 5G. What they've done is they've modified the 5G standard to make the same waveform and the same physics and protocols now have the peak to average power ratios and the physical properties that make them usable and optimal to use natively on board spacecraft and aircraft and terminals. So by getting behind this, we hope that we can radically lower the cost of satellite equipment. Some examples here, if you look at spectrum in the Ka band that's often used on satellites, that actually overlaps with a lot of the 5G 28 gigahertz frequency that's getting built out terrestrially. If you look at, like, say, Iridium spectrum in L-band at 1600 megahertz and 10 megahertz wide, that's right next to 5G channel 24. So imagine if the same volumes of cell phones that are globally manufactured can natively connect to satellites, the same chipsets. If they're a narrowband, they have enough gain, they have enough power to close that link, the same equipment can. If you need a higher gain, you need an antenna to connect to it, it's just connecting like you would a MiFi or a box at your house to a bigger antenna to radically reduce these costs. So Northern Sky Research, which is a major market analyst firm, has said that if we pull this off, if we're able to transform the satellite industry to adopt the same value chain and supply chain that's used for global cell phones and connectivity, this instantly opens the door for satellite to go mainstream and leverage the mass market production and distribution ecosystems that are used for cell phone by aligning these industries with cellular. And we hope to radically reduce the cost and bring internet to more people. That's it. Thanks.